Inside Kensington Palace, a decision has been made that few people saw coming. Not from King Charles, not from the palace's senior advisors, but from the man who will one day sit on the throne himself, Prince William. For decades, the British monarchy has operated on a simple, unspoken rule: tradition first, change later, and only after careful, cautious deliberation. But according to multiple royal insiders, William is no longer willing to wait. He is reportedly stepping back from the packed schedule of engagements that has defined royal life for generations, choosing instead to focus on fewer, more meaningful causes. He is said to be reshaping how the monarchy communicates with the public, and he is doing it, insiders say, on his own terms, even when that means friction with his own father. This is the story of a future king who appears determined to build the monarchy his way, long before the crown is his. And it's a story that reveals just how much the House of Windsor may be about to change. Here's what really happened, and why it has reportedly left even King Charles unsettled. Before we go further, if you're enjoying this deep dive into the royal family, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Now, let's get back to the story. To understand why this moment matters, you have to understand the pressure this family has been living under. King Charles ascended the throne in 2022, carrying the weight of his mother's 70-year reign. A reign so steady, so quietly disciplined, that it became the very definition of what the monarchy was supposed to be. Elizabeth too rarely wavered. She rarely explained herself. She let the institution speak through continuity rather than change. Charles inherited that legacy, but he also inherited a monarchy already straining under modern pressures, a shrinking pool of working royals, a public increasingly sceptical of hereditary privilege, and a family fractured by the departure of his younger son, Prince Harry, and Harry's wife, Meghan, in 2020. Then came the King's own cancer diagnosis in early 2024, which pulled him out of public view for a period and thrust the question of succession into sharper focus than anyone had anticipated. Through it all, Prince William has been watching, and by most accounts, learning. He has told interviewers directly that he hopes the monarchy does not return to certain practices from his own childhood, a rare, pointed admission from a man who is typically careful with his words. He has spoken about wanting a more modern, more relatable institution, and according to royal correspondents who cover the family closely, watching is no longer enough for him. William, they say, has begun acting. That action is what has reportedly unsettled the palace. Consider, too, the environment William has grown up watching from the inside. He came of age observing a grandmother who ruled through steadiness and near-total silence on her personal views, and a father who spent nearly 70 years as heir, filling that long apprenticeship with public advocacy on causes from architecture to sustainable farming, often to the discomfort of government ministers who preferred their future king stay quiet. William inherited neither model wholesale. He witnessed, firsthand, both the strength of his grandmother's discipline and the friction his father's outspokenness occasionally created. And by most accounts, he has spent years quietly deciding which parts of each approach he wants to keep, and which he intends to leave behind entirely. That process of decision-making has, according to people close to him, accelerated sharply over the past 2 years. The King's cancer diagnosis in early 2024 did more than pull Charles from public view for a period of treatment. It forced the family and the institution itself to confront the reality that transitions of power are no longer distant hypotheticals. William, still only in his early 40s, suddenly found himself functioning in a semi-active capacity as the family's most visible working royal at points when his father's health sidelined him. That experience, insiders suggest, gave William a taste of operational control he had not previously had. And, by several accounts, he has been reluctant to fully relinquish it since. Let's take a closer look at what William is actually doing, and why it's being described by royal watchers as one of the boldest moves of his life so far. According to reporting this year, William has been quietly reducing the number of official public engagements he takes on, choosing instead to concentrate his time on a smaller set of causes he considers genuinely meaningful: homelessness, mental health, and environmental initiatives among them. To some royal commentators, this looks like William stepping back. To others, it looks like something more deliberate, an attempt to redefine what royal work even means in the 21st century. One royal expert described William's evolving approach as closer to how a chief executive might run an organisation than how previous royals have traditionally operated, trading a calendar full of short public appearances for longer-term projects with measurable outcomes. Rather than hundreds of brief meet and greets each year, the thinking goes, William would rather commit himself to a handful of long-range initiatives that could still be shaping communities a decade from now. That is a genuine departure from the model his grandmother followed for 70 years, and even from the model his own father has tried to maintain, cancer treatment notwithstanding, through an unrelenting public schedule. Critics have not been shy about pushing back. William has faced accusations of being work-shy in the past, with commentators comparing his engagement numbers unfavourably to those of harder-working members of the family. But people close to him insist this criticism misses the point entirely, that what William is attempting is not less work, but a different kind of work, one built around long-term impact rather than sheer volume of appearances. It is worth pausing here to consider just how radical that reframing actually is within the context of royal history. For more than a century, the value of a working royal has been measured almost entirely by visible output. Ribbon cuttings, hospital visits, regimental inspections, the steady drumbeat of appearances that fill the court circular each week and remind the public the family is, in the phrase so often used internally, still on the job. That metric has served the institution well precisely because it is simple, countable, and difficult to dispute. A prince or princess who appears at 400 engagements a year is, by definition, working hard. William's model discards that logic almost entirely. It asks the public to trust that a smaller number of carefully chosen, long-running projects, a homelessness initiative measured in years rather than weeks, an environmental prize designed to run for a decade, a mental health campaign built around sustained partnership rather than a single royal visit, can deliver more genuine impact than the older, appearance-heavy approach ever did. That is a difficult case to make to a public conditioned to equate visibility with effort, and it is precisely why some royal watchers remain sceptical that William's approach will be well received, at least in its early years. No account of William's evolving approach would be complete without acknowledging Catherine, the Princess of Wales, whose own experience with cancer treatment and recovery over the past 2 years has visibly shaped how the couple now approaches royal duty. Sources close to the family have described Catherine as central to William's thinking about pacing and priorities, with the couple reportedly in close agreement that a more sustainable, focused model of royal work will serve both the institution and their 3 children better than the relentless public schedule that defined previous generations. Their move to Forest Lodge in Windsor, described by royal commentators as the family's long-term forever home, has been widely read as a physical symbol of that same philosophy, putting distance, quite literally, between the family's private life and the intensity of central London public duty, while still remaining close enough to fulfil the obligations the role demands. The changes reportedly go beyond scheduling. William is said to be pushing for the monarchy to modernise how it communicates, leaning further into digital platforms, streamlining ceremonial roles, and, according to some accounts, quietly moving away from traditions he views as overly theatrical or disconnected from ordinary people's lives. This mirrors comments William has made publicly himself. He has previously stated, in his own words, a hope that the institution does not slide backward into old patterns he experienced growing up, patterns that placed enormous pressure on young royals and offered little room for change. It is a rare moment of a senior royal openly signalling discomfort with aspects of the very institution he is destined to lead. The clearest public signal of this shift came into view during this year's Trooping the Colour, the King's official birthday celebration and one of the monarchy's most visible annual traditions. Royal watchers noted something unusual about the Buckingham Palace balcony appearance. Several familiar faces were missing. Neither the Sussexes nor the family of the disgraced former Duke of York appeared, and the resulting image was, by design or circumstance, a visibly smaller, more streamlined royal family than the one the public had grown used to seeing. Royal commentators were quick to describe this as evidence of William's long-term vision taking shape, a monarchy built around fewer people, fewer official faces, and, by extension, fewer opportunities for scandal to touch the institution directly. Not everyone agrees on where the idea for this slimmed-down structure actually originated. Royal biographer Robert Hardman has pushed back on the narrative that Charles was ever the driving force behind reducing the working royal family, arguing there is little evidence the king personally called for it. If that account is accurate, it raises an intriguing possibility that the slimmed-down monarchy so often associated with Charles's reign may, in practice, be shaped as much by William's instincts as by his father's original intentions. Perhaps the most sensitive element of this story involves the relationship between William and his father directly. According to insider accounts published this summer, tension between the two men has grown, particularly following King Charles's own outreach to Prince Harry. That outreach reportedly culminated in a private meeting between Charles and Harry at Highgrove House, the King's Gloucestershire residence, following years of public and painful estrangement between father and son. For a king who has spent much of his reign trying to project unity, extending an olive branch to Harry was, by most measures, a deeply personal decision. And, according to sources close to the family, not one that sat comfortably with William. Sources describe William as having grown increasingly frustrated, both with the reconciliation efforts toward Harry and with how the king has handled the fallout from the Prince Andrew scandal, which has continued to cast a long shadow over the institution even after Andrew's formal removal from royal titles and duties. One insider went so far as to describe relations between father and son as being at their lowest point in years, with William characterised as sharing his father's well-known stubborn streak. a trait that, insiders suggest, makes any resolution between them more complicated, not less. Whether or not every detail of these accounts holds up to scrutiny, and readers should always treat anonymously sourced palace claims with a degree of caution. The broader pattern being described is consistent across multiple outlets, a future king increasingly willing to chart his own course, even when it puts him at odds with the reigning monarch. There is another layer to William's evolving vision that has drawn attention from royal watchers, reports that he has considered bringing extended family members, cousins such as Princess Beatrice, Princess Eugenie, and Zara Tindall, back into more active working roles once he becomes king. On the surface, that might sound like a reversal of the very slimmed-down approach he's credited with pursuing. But royal commentators argue it actually reflects the same underlying philosophy, not fewer royals for the sake of fewer royals, but the right royals, doing meaningful work, without the baggage that has weighed down other branches of the family in recent years. It's a subtle but important distinction, and one that suggests William's real project isn't simply about shrinking the institution, it's about redesigning it. No discussion of William's frustrations with his father would be complete without addressing the long shadow cast by the former Prince Andrew. Andrew's association with the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein has haunted the family for years, culminating in his formal loss of the prince title and remaining honours in 2025, a move widely seen as long overdue by royal watchers and one that came only after sustained pressure, both public and, reportedly, private. Kensington Palace confirmed in early 2026 that William and Catherine had been deeply concerned by continuing revelations linking Andrew to Epstein, a rare instance of the Wales household commenting directly, even in restrained terms, on the conduct of another family member. That statement alone signalled how seriously William has taken the reputational damage the Andrew scandal has inflicted on the institution as a whole, damage he reportedly believes the king was too slow to address decisively. Insiders describe William as having pushed, behind the scenes, for a faster and more complete separation between Andrew and the working royal family than his father was initially willing to pursue. Whether that pressure directly contributed to the eventual outcome is difficult to confirm with certainty, but the timeline, mounting revelations, sustained criticism, and eventual decisive action, fits the pattern royal watchers have come to associate with William's broader approach. A willingness to make the harder, less comfortable call once he judges that the institution's reputation is genuinely at stake. But the story doesn't end there. Because to really understand what William is attempting, you have to look at how often a British heir has tried to reshape the monarchy before even taking the crown, and what happened to the ones who tried. Why does this matter? Because Prince William would hardly be the first heir to the throne to chafe against tradition, and history offers some sobering lessons about how that tends to go. Consider Edward VIII, William's great-great-great-grandfather, who spent nearly 60 years waiting to become king while his mother, Queen Victoria, kept him deliberately shut out of state affairs. When he finally ascended in 1901, Edward moved quickly to modernise the monarchy's public image, embracing a more social, more visible style of kingship than Victoria's long, secluded widowhood had allowed. His reign was short, but his instinct to update the institution for a changing era set a precedent that echoes in William's own approach today. Then there is the far more cautionary tale of Edward Voyet, who acceded to the throne in 1936, determined to be a different kind of king, more modern, less bound by convention. Within less than a year, his insistence on marrying the American divorcee Wallis Simpson against the fierce objections of the government and the Church of England triggered a constitutional crisis that forced his abdication. His brother, George VI, inherited a throne under conditions of real emergency, and it fell to him, a reluctant, previously overlooked second son, to rebuild public confidence in the institution almost from scratch. George VI's quiet, dutiful reign became, in many ways, the model that Elizabeth II would inherit and refine for the next 7 decades. The lesson from 1936 has echoed through the family ever since. Individual desire for change, however sincere, can collide catastrophically with institutional stability if it moves too fast or without sufficient consensus. It is a lesson the family has clearly internalised. When Princess Margaret's own relationship with a divorced man became public in the 1950s, the palace moved with extreme caution, mindful of the abdication crisis just decades earlier. Elizabeth II's 70-year reign, by contrast, offers the opposite model. Change achieved almost entirely through patience rather than confrontation. She modernised the monarchy gradually, introducing televised coverage of the coronation against the advice of some officials, later opening royal finances to public scrutiny, and slowly adapting the family's public role decade by decade without ever appearing to rush. Her method was evolution, not revolution, and it is widely credited with preserving the institution's stability through decades of enormous social change in Britain. Charles, in turn, has spent his reign trying to walk a middle path between his mother's patience and his own long-held desire, dating back decades, to see the monarchy modernise more meaningfully, on issues from architecture and the environment to interfaith relations. Now, if reports are accurate, William appears to be pushing that timeline forward once again, perhaps more assertively than his father anticipated. What makes William's position different from Edward White's is important to note. Unlike Edward, William is not defying the government or triggering a constitutional standoff. His reported changes, fewer engagements, a more focused public role, a more modern communications strategy, are administrative and cultural rather than legal or constitutional. That distinction matters enormously. It suggests an heir working within the system to reshape it, rather than one working against it. Whether that approach proves more durable than his predecessor's attempts remains, of course, an open question. One that will likely only be answered once William actually wears the crown. There is also a useful parallel in George VI's approach to rebuilding the monarchy's credibility after the abdication crisis. George VI did not attempt sweeping reform. Instead, he leaned heavily on symbolism and steadiness, remaining in London during the Blitz rather than evacuating, visiting bombed neighbourhoods personally, and using restraint rather than radical change to restore public confidence. It was Elizabeth too, inheriting that rebuilt foundation, who was able to modernise gradually precisely because her father had first re-established trust through consistency. William, by most accounts, appears to be attempting something closer to a hybrid of these two models, borrowing his great-grandfather's instinct for restraint and symbolic reassurance in moments of family crisis, such as the handling of the Andrews scandal, while also pursuing more active, structural change in how the monarchy operates day to day, closer to Edward VIA's more assertive modernising instinct. Whether that hybrid approach can hold together over the course of an entire reign rather than the opening years of one is a question even the most seasoned royal historians say cannot yet be answered with confidence. None of William's reported strategy exists in a vacuum. It is unfolding against a backdrop of genuinely shifting public sentiment toward the monarchy itself, sentiment that helps explain why William may feel such urgency to act now rather than wait for the crown. Polling from Ipsos, published in the summer of 2026, found that support for retaining the monarchy had fallen to its lowest level since tracking began back in 1993, with only a little over half of Britons now favouring the institution's continuation and roughly a quarter preferring an elected head of state. The generational divide within that data is striking. Among Britons under 35, support for the monarchy has fallen well below 50%, while a competing preference for a republic has grown to nearly equal, or in some surveys surpassing, monarchist sentiment in that age group. Among older Britons, by sharp contrast, support for the crown remains robust, with roughly 3/4 of those over 55 still backing the institution. Other polling paints a somewhat less alarming picture. YouGov's regular tracking from earlier in 2026 found a clear majority of Britons, roughly 2 in 3, still wish to preserve the monarchy, with a similar share believing it benefits the country overall. Within that same polling, King Charles continued to receive positive marks from around 6 in 10 respondents, while William and Catherine remained the most popular living members of the family by a comfortable margin. Taken together, these numbers tell a nuanced story. The monarchy is not in any immediate danger of collapse, but the long-term trend line, particularly among younger Britons, is undeniably moving in a direction that should concern anyone planning to lead the institution for the next several decades. It is precisely this generational erosion of support that many royal commentators believe is driving William's urgency. A monarch who ascends the throne in, say, 15 or 20 years' time, and who has spent that entire period simply maintaining his father's approach rather than actively building appeal among younger citizens, could find himself presiding over an institution with a rapidly shrinking base of genuine public enthusiasm. William, according to those close to him, is acutely aware of this risk and increasingly unwilling to leave it unaddressed until he actually wears the crown. So what does all of this actually tell us? It tells us that the modern British monarchy is entering a quiet but consequential transition, not from one reign to the next, not yet, but from one philosophy of kingship to another. King Charles has spent his reign balancing tradition with incremental reform, often finding himself caught between his mother's long shadow and his own reformist instincts. Prince William, by contrast, appears to be signalling a more decisive shift, a monarchy built around fewer public appearances but deeper impact, tighter family structure but broader long-term ambition, and a communication style built for a public that increasingly expects transparency and relevance rather than pageantry alone. Whether that vision succeeds will depend on more than William's own convictions. It will depend on public appetite for a more streamlined royal family, on his ability to manage relationships within his own family without the kind of rupture that defined the Harry and Meghan departure, and on whether the balance he's attempting to strike between efficiency and visibility actually resonates with a British public whose support for the monarchy, while still a majority, has been gradually softening among younger generations. History suggests that heirs who try to reshape the monarchy before their time rarely do so without cost. But it also suggests that those who manage the transition carefully, learning from example rather than reacting against it, can leave institutions stronger, not weaker, than they found them. Which path Prince William is on may not be fully clear for years, but the direction he has chosen to walk is, by every indication, already set. For now, what we're witnessing is not a coronation, but a rehearsal a future king testing, in real time, the shape of the monarchy he intends to lead. It is playing out in reduced schedules and quiet policy shifts rather than dramatic declarations, but the implications are just as significant. Whatever tension it has created within the family, and whatever uncertainty it has stirred at the palace, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. When William eventually becomes king, the institution he leads may look, function, and communicate in ways his grandmother would barely recognise. Only time. And the British public will ultimately decide whether that transformation succeeds. If you found this deep dive into Prince William's evolving vision for the monarchy insightful, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more in-depth royal analysis. Let us know in the comments. Do you think William's approach will strengthen the monarchy's future, or does it carry the kind of risk that has troubled royal reformers before him? And don't forget to turn on notifications, because there is much more of this unfolding story still to come.